Well, tonight we're finishing up a series called Attitude Check. And let's just be honest. How often do we have a bad attitude? I have been filling in for the past few weeks, just on Tuesday morning and Thursday morning at a local school. And some of the kids are wonderful and sweet and great. And then some of them are incredible reflections of their parents. And they're just, can you say this about a kid? They're just jerks. And I'm not going to tell you which ones they are, but if you were there for 5 minutes, you'd be able to know. And I'm like, man, what kind of environment are these kids being raised in? And it's hard. Dawn knows. She's around them. And we're actually in a world now in the United States where sweetness and kindness and respect are not the norms. Now the norms are to be rude, to be crass, to look for offense, to be cynical. Cynical is a big word. A lot of cynicism in our culture. And it's just not lovely. And here's the bad thing. Not only does it make it not fun to be around them, but I guarantee you right now, if they don't get that attitude fixed, they're not going to get great jobs. And I don't care how fair you're supposed to be treated. If you don't like somebody, you're not going to promote them. And you hate to see these kids with these sour attitudes, and you just kind of know what kind of future lies out there. And they're going to be miserable, and they're going to make everybody around them miserable. And so, but the problem is, too many times we're the same way. Too many times we're cynical. And we're negative, and we're nasty, and we're bitter, and we're angry. And so tonight, I want to share with you a passage from James. Now, James is a whole book about attitude checks. And so James really gives us something fascinating in chapter 3. Earlier in staff meeting, we talked about the tongue. We're not talking about the tongue here, but we're talking about our attitudes, that which drives our tongues. And so I'm going to encourage you to open your Bibles because you're going to do a little study at your own table. And I want you to just look into this and share with us your conclusions. I'm going to give you some time, and then I'll share with you my conclusions as we work together. But I want you to just have a little fun at your table, unpacking what James is talking about. We're going to start in James chapter 3, verse 13. Let me just start with this question. Who among you is wise? Go ahead and raise your hand. All right. Some of you are wise and you're modest. Some of you are wise enough not to fall into my trap, but it's not really a trap. But who is wise among you? And here's what it says. Let him show by his good behavior his deeds and gentleness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy, selfish ambition in your heart, do not be arrogant and so lie against the truth. This wisdom is not which comes down from above, but it's earthly, natural, and demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every evil thing. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, reasonable, full of mercy and good fruits, unwavering, without hypocrisy. And the seed whose fruit is righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. So we went 13 through 18. What I'd like for you to do is just at your table, I want you to just make your observations from that passage. What's it about? What's he talking about? What's he trying to get us to know here? What can you glean from that passage, especially as it relates to your attitude? Let me give you about 10 minutes to talk amongst yourself, all right? All right, if you look with me, we're going to go back to James 3. We're going to look at this at the Message Bible, all right? Do you want to be counted wise to build a reputation for wisdom? How many of you would say that would be you? You would like to be counted as wise. You would like to have a reputation for being wise. Here's what you do. Live well, live wisely, live humbly. It's the way you live, not the way you talk, that counts. Mean-spirited ambition is not wisdom. Boasting that you are wise is not wisdom. Twisting the truth to make yourself sound wise isn't wisdom. It's the furthest thing from wisdom. It's animal cunning, devilishly conniving. Whenever you are trying to look better than others or to get better of others, things fall apart and everyone ends up at the other's throats. Real wisdom, God's wisdom, begins with a holy life. It's characterized by getting along with others. It's gentle and reasonable, overflowing with mercy and blessings, not hot one day and cold the next, not two-faced. Now pay attention to the end of this. This is really good. You can develop a healthy, robust what? Which means what? A circle of friends and family, right? So how you live with one another, it can be good. You can develop a healthy, robust community that lives right with God and enjoy its results only if you do the hard work of getting along with each other, treating each other with dignity and honor. Well, let's just be honest. This is a major attitude change for anyone who is born fallen. And it is an attitude change that hopefully the Holy Spirit helps us to accomplish in our lives. But James is writing this to his brothers and sisters in Christ. And it is quite possible that you can be saved and still be a jerk. And all God's people said, it's true. There are saved people who are just not nice. And so James is giving us an opportunity to have an attitude check, to correct an attitude. And this attitude can lead, a right attitude can lead to healthy relationships with the fruit of those relationships. But the opposite is true as well. People who don't make this adjustment, who live in that lost and fallen state of mind, are going to be miserable, and they're going to make everybody else around them miserable. And who wants to be with miserable people? Not I. Right. So peace, major issue. You guys, this is actually wisdom literature. Jim, it's really similar to what's in the Old Testament. Wisdom literature usually goes A to B, and then it goes back and forth, B to A. So a positive example, a negative example. And you certainly have that in this passage. And so, and actually, he's talking about if you want to be wise, this is what you do, and you have the positives and the negatives. Did anybody pick up on the positives and the negatives and the comparison between the two? Back table, who's your spokesperson back there? Not hot one day and cold the next, not two-faced. We ever struggle with that? Yeah. What affects your attitude? How many of you have a bad attitude when you're hungry? All right. How many of you have a bad attitude when you're tired? How many of you have a bad attitude when you're sick? How many of you have a bad attitude when you're stressed out? Some of you have been raising your hands, must be sick, tired, all the time. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Rotten people. If we go down the list far enough, we always have an excuse for our bad attitudes. And it doesn't say that you should have a bad attitude when you feel bad and have a good attitude when you feel good. But did you know what's the consequences of selfishness and bitterness and envy? What are the consequences here? What does it say the consequences are? Misery for yourself and for others. It ruins your relationships, and it brings misery. It brings misery. On the opposite side, what does it bring? The blessings of peace and unity and the fruits of what it means to be in community. Now, what's going on in the world today? Community, healthy community or not? No. So what's one of the greatest ways we can be a witness in the world? To be a healthy community. People want to be a part of a healthy community. But we have to work on it, because how many of us realize that we're not naturally healthy? And salvation doesn't make us that way. Sanctification does. And sanctification is what does it say here? It's the hard work of being at peace. Is it hard being at peace with one another? Even in a church? If you're in a room with 300 people, how many opinions do you have? You have 300. And some people have 3 opinions. They just don't know which one they have yet. Whichever one you come up with, they're going to argue with it. Yeah, was the word hypocrisy in that NASB version? the NIV version. So you have those fruit. What is love? Love is, say it. What is love? Patient, and it is kind, and it is does not seek its own, doesn't boast, is not proud. These are all relational things, aren't they? And what are the fruits of the Spirit? Love, joy. Joy and peace could be singular, but none of the rest of them can be, really. Self-control is singular. But patience, kindness. Patience is not singular. Kindness, gentleness. Those things all have to do with relationships. And so when you live in healthy relationships, you're going to have the blessing of those relationships. When you don't, and you follow after worldly wisdom, you're going to have the misery that comes with it. You've all listened to Dave Ramsey, I'm assuming, at some point along the way. Dave Ramsey is a Christian financial counselor. There are lots of secular financial counselors. They'll give you a lot of very similar advice, except that Dave Ramsey talks about at the end of all of it how to be a giver. That we manage well so that we can give well, so that we can be generous. And that's a different place than worldly wisdom ends. Worldly wisdom says, do this so you can do all this for yourself. Dave Ramsey finds real joy as he teaches us how to be generous. I think that's a really great point. I'm glad you saved that for last. You have to be aware of it and you have to work on it. Those two things are vital. You have to constantly do an attitude check with yourself. So let's look at this. All right? Worldly wisdom has two key indicators in this verse. These comes right out of the verse. What's the first one? Bitter envy. Would anybody like to guess what bitter envy is? A feeling of discontented or resentful longing aroused by someone else's possessions, qualities, or luck. Does that ever affect you? Do you ever, things are being passed out in a group, compliments, nice gift, and what are you immediately thinking? From the time you're 18 months old, what are you thinking? Where's mine? Where is mine? And Jim pointed out earlier that envy that's constantly thinking, where is mine? What about me? Look at me. Don't overlook me. Mine's not as nice as yours. Today, Angela Mills and I had suckers for our choir that we're working with at school. And so I hand out everybody to get a sucker. Well, I got an orange one. Well, crying out loud, 30 seconds ago, you didn't have one. Yeah, good grief. You got a purple one. That's not fair. Ugh. Next time, I'm going to leave you out. But envy over time becomes bitterness. Bitterness is the idea that there becomes those roots that Jim exactly expressed. They become so entangled and so deep in your life that it's very hard to eradicate. So if you have a bitter root in your life, especially a bitter root of envy, it shows up in almost everything that you do. And you can't keep it out of your relationship. You can't keep it out of your life. So the fruit of that bitter root is constantly coming up in your life. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. There was a second thing that shows up there. What is it? Selfish ambition. Let's just talk for a second about what that is. Here's a definition. The desire to do something that focuses on your wants and desires and what you can get from a person, from a place, or a situation, rather than focusing on what you can give to it. So everything in this has to do with, I want it for myself, I'm taking care of myself, I'm looking out for number one. And by the way, is there any more exact commentary on what worldly wisdom is than this? Look out for number one. Except that what? None of us are number one. We're number 7 billion. And there's 699 in front of us. And so the sooner we realize that, the better we are. Oh, I'm so thankful I have an orange sucker. 30 seconds ago, I didn't have an orange sucker. As a matter of fact, would you like an orange sucker? That's a better way to be. Instead of complaining and griping. Angela Mills is coming in after we started a little bit here. but we're just talking about how we've noticed there's some kids at school that are are reflections of their homes. And there's one student that thinks that they ought to run the whole class. And I'm sitting there thinking, how old are you? 12? And what kind of, you're in the 7th grade? And you have how many years on the job experience being a teacher? And, okay. I have a hard time not realizing that the person that is in the room with them is older than Methuselah, went to school for 45 years, and has been teaching forever. And I'm not talking about Angie Mills. Whew, that was almost not wise right there. So let's talk about those two things again. What are they? Bitter envy and selfish ambition. This is the picture. This is the key indicators that worldly wisdom is running your life and ruining your relationships. So whenever these two exist in a relationship, the relationship cannot function well, because there's always going to be bad attitudes. There's always going to be fuming, fussing, and fighting. There's always going to be a lack of satisfaction. I got an orange one. I wanted a purple one. There's always going to be something that's wrong, and you'll never be able to do enough, be enough, have enough, because these two things are insatiable. They're constantly like a black hole. They will never be satisfied. And so the problem with worldly wisdom is it leads you to a black hole of misery. And many of us have done that. There are characteristics of worldly wisdom, of what we were just talking about, that's also listed here. It says it's earthly. What does that mean? Only concerned with the here and now. Very good. Next week's sermon, I'll give you a little indicator. When you walk in wisdom, you're always looking to the goal, and the goal is not here and now. What's the goal? Heaven, right? And so worldly wisdom always has to do with the here and now. Thank you. It never thinks about eternity, never thinks about next month or next year. It's always thinking about what I want and what I want right now, which is another indicator that it is natural, which means what? What is it? Human, I would actually say beastly. These are beastly qualities, all right? I've got 2 dogs at the house right now. We have our dog, Mocha, and then we have Ken and Alyssa's dog. They're on vacation, Nugget, all right? If I get out a treat, what's the only thing they're thinking about? What if I'm not even getting out a treat? I'm getting out my dinner. What are they thinking about? Yeah, and we really don't feed the dogs or anything like that, but they're there right there, because all they can think about is what? I want that, I want that, I want that, I want that. And Mocha will look like she's not looking at you, but she'll look at the side of her eye like, you got a pretzel. I like pretzels. She'll act like she's not paying attention to you, but she'll be really close. Nugget, she'll just jump on your head. And so natural, it means it's beastly. And so many of us who adhere to worldly wisdom are really as dumb as a sled track when it comes to wisdom, because that wisdom never leads anywhere but destruction. And thirdly, this is really interesting. This is from the passages, not from me. Worldly wisdom comes from where? The pit of hell. And so he doesn't want Bonnie and Casey to have a great relationship. So what's he trying to slip in there? I'll tell you what he's trying to slip in there. He's trying to slip these 2 things in there. Bitter envy and selfish ambition. I have a feeling that Bonnie and Casey kind of have that pretty well licked, but I bet it shows up every once in a while. Bonnie says it shows up with Casey. But what's the fruit of worldly wisdom? Can anybody tell me what you think the fruit of worldly wisdom is? We've already talked about it a little bit. Christy, what's one fruit of worldly wisdom? What would you think? It can be a rotten fruit. Of worldly wisdom? See, I'm just seeing if the teachers are paying attention in class. It's always the teachers. Anger. Would you all agree? What else? Confusion, chaos. Look in your passage. There's a bunch of jealousy, What is it over here? Fear. What else? Discontent, arguments, broken relationships, loneliness. The opposite of what you want. Exactly right. That's why we have to be smart enough to know. Listen, we have to be smart enough to know that Oreos are not the way to being thin. Yeah. If you're thinking thin Oreos are the way to being thin, we need to talk. Because I know what you do. You eat twice as many of them. And by the way, is there anything more unsatisfying than a thin Oreo? Give me the cream on those fat ones, man. So here's what happens. Turmoil. How many of you would agree? Turmoil is constantly being upset. Constantly, everything's in a state of being upset. Constantly overturned, bubbling, boiling. Constant state of turmoil. What else? Confusion. We already said that. And yeah, I heard Sandra quoting that earlier. Double-minded, hot one day, cold the next. And when we follow worldly wisdom, you 1 minute you just love and adore somebody, next minute you can't stand them because they didn't do something that you wanted them to do. It's just a mess. Not happy with yourself. That's a good one. You have blessings and cursings. So you'll bless somebody 1 minute and the next minute you'll curse them. It's hot and cold. Love and hate. Fighting. Here, let's just get into this list. Fighting, feuding, hurt feelings, anger, bitterness, resentment, discord, disunity, restlessness, hatred, arguments, and self-pity. Would you agree that's a pretty good list? Now, how many of you want that in life? You want that in your home? Want that in your workplace? When you want people to think about you, you want them to think about how you're looking out for number one and that these are the fruits in your life. That's what you want to think, right? Well, if that's what you follow with worldly wisdom, that's what they will see, and they don't want anything to do with it. That's what I just want to grab these students and grab them by the shoulders and shake them and say, nobody's going to want to live with you. Nobody's going to want to, if they do live with you, they're not going to want to live with you for long. Nobody's going to hire you. Nobody's ever going to want to promote you. Nobody's going to want for you to wait on them at the restaurant. Nobody's going to want to wait on you at the restaurant. Don't you understand that if you follow this train right here, it's going to come off the track and you're going to be a mess and be a miserable person for the rest of your life, just like your parents are right now. But thank God I've had the wisdom not to say that. But as my congregation, and as those of us who are part of James's congregation, how can we not take this and unpack it and let it make a difference in our life? So then when we say attitude check, we should say, look out for others, right? Look out for others. Don't be selfish. Let's talk about one single benefit of worldly wisdom. Is there one single benefit of worldly wisdom? I can only think of one. Well, you might get ahead in the world, but here it is. After enough pain, it can lead us back to God. Because all have sinned and fall short. And that falling short will absolutely point us to God. And by the way, here's our opportunity, friends. Here's our opportunity in this world that's falling apart, these relationships that are unnatural, abnormal, built on carnal, fleshly, selfish ambitions. There's going to be a world of broken people who are desperate and need God and need Christian relationships. That's why we must guard the integrity of our church and the unity of our church and the peace of our church, and we must do everything that we can to protect that. It's vital. Well, let's talk about godly wisdom for a minute then. What do you think one of the main characteristics listed for godly wisdom is what? Did anybody see it? Purity. All right? And that is, you can maybe list that as pure motives. Now, none of us probably altogether have pure motives. Somebody said, can you ever do anything that's truly selfless? And I'd say probably not, because it feels good to do things for other people. But that's all right. That's the way it's supposed to be. It's a good thing. All right? But godly wisdom is pure. It's not deceitful. It's not hypocritical, as some of you mentioned earlier. It's not lying. It's not mean-spirited. It's not haughty. It's not fake. It's pure. It's also focuses on selfless motives and attitudes. So tonight, every Wednesday night for the past several months, we've come here on Wednesday and we've eaten. And does anybody want to guess how much the crew back there got paid? Well, I'm personally going to double their salary. I'm going to cover the doubling of their salary. All right? Angela got paid nothing for what she's done. That's a lot of time on Wednesday. Lisa got paid nothing. Ellen didn't get paid. Nobody got paid. Some may have got reimbursed for their expenses, but nobody got paid for their work. Why'd they do it? They're selfless. And they don't follow worldly wisdom, because worldly wisdom would say that's the stupidest thing to do. But we're blessed by it. Aren't you blessed by it? And don't you love those who did that for us? And we pray that they're blessed by it. It's the opposite of putting self first. Godly wisdom, pure wisdom, is the opposite of putting self first. If you really want an attitude check, put others first. And have you seen those posters, I am second? How about third, fourth, fifth? All right? It's okay. Because the fifth person still gets an orange sucker. It's okay. All right? They all taste the same anyway. Any kid knows that. Other characteristics of godly wisdom. And I like this one. If you walk with godly wisdom, what are you going to have in your home and your relationships? Do you all know that this has been a really peaceful church? It really has. We get along with one another. There's a few turkeys. We're not going to tell you who they are. But it's been a peaceful church. You cannot have peace when you have cynicism. You cannot have peace when you have selfish ambition, when you have a critical spirit. You can't have peace when you have somebody trying to gain attention for themselves. You can't have peace when you're tearing down the youth minister or tearing down the youth, the student, children's pastor. You can't have peace when you're tearing down the pastor. You can't have peace when you're attacking the elders. You can't have peace when you're doing that. And by the way, anybody know how much the elders get paid? I get paid to be good. The elders are good for nothing. Other characteristics of godly wisdom is what? Considerate. It means it thinks of others. And so peaceable, it gets along well. There's unity and peace. But considerate means it's thinking of others. And so this happens in our homes, all right? So does it leave stuff all over the house for the other person to pick up? Does it go downstairs to fix a sandwich without asking the other person, would you like a sandwich? Some of you are stepping on your toes right now. This is an interesting one. Nobody will guess this one, but it's in the passage. Anybody want to say that? Submissive. What does that mean? In a home, who's supposed to submit? The husband. The wife to the husband and the husband to the wife. We're supposed to submit to one another in love and respect. There is an order in the home. The Bible clearly teaches it. It doesn't mean one's more important than the other or more intelligent than the other, but it does mean that there is an order in the home, but there's a mutual submission. Husbands should submit to their wives, wives to their husbands. Children should submit to their parents. Well, there's a novel idea. You two are doing a great job with your children. They're excellent kids. They're amazing kids, and you should be very proud. And we lift you up as an example for how you're raising your kids. They're very respectful. They're very kind. And perhaps spanked along the way. Every kid has their moments, but this week we're going to celebrate the graduation of Grant and Bailey. I mean, two incredible kids. We're really proud of Laura for the work that she put in on that. But what wonderful kids. And you look at two kids, and by the way, they love each other. And they love their sister. You can just tell that's a home where this has been modeled. I'm sure it's not perfect, but there's submission to one another going on in that home, and it's great how it shows up. And I love this, full of mercy and good fruit. Can anybody tell me what mercy is? Forgiveness. I would like to say that it's forgiveness in advance. Yes, you don't deserve it. But forgiveness is when somebody else has messed up and you go on. And I would like to say that it's in advance, that it's already granted. You don't have to walk on eggshells. You don't have to wait for 3 days after you messed up to receive mercy. You live in a merciful home where people aren't constantly looking out for themselves and being angry when something doesn't go their way. Listen, here's what anger is a direct result of this, all right? You can write this down. It's a direct result of you and me being little dictators. And when something doesn't go our way, we get angry. And then what does it say? And good fruit. Isn't that what you want in your home? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. I like this one too. It's impartial. This is important. The story of Joseph and his brothers. Joseph was a pretty special kid, but whenever Dad showed favoritism to Joseph, it really didn't work out well. But we're impartial. That means, here, now pay really close attention, impartial means we don't show partiality to ourselves. Okay? And then how about this one? We talked earlier about hypocrisy. This kind of love, this kind of godly wisdom is sincere. All right? Now let's talk real quickly about the fruits then. We talked about fruits earlier. What are some of the fruits then of godly wisdom? Well, if you walk in godly wisdom, you'll be right. How about that? Don't you want to be right? How many of us live to be right? Well, the best way to be right is to put others first. All right? Be right. And then how about this? We said earlier that we don't live for short-sighted goals. When we put others first, when we live with peace, we're rewarded. How are we rewarded? We're rewarded with healthy relationships, peace in our homes, respect from those who know us. We're rewarded with a good witness. We're rewarded with the fruits of other people wanting to know Christ based upon that witness. We're rewarded with the respect that comes from having real wisdom, not this other nonsense wisdom. People will respect you. They might not even like what you believe, but they'll respect you. And how about this one? When we're rewarded, what? Great are your rewards where? In heaven. When you follow godly wisdom, put others first, you adjust the attitude from selfishness to otherliness. God sees that, and he'll reward that, and he really will. All right, and so how do we fight the fight that matters? How do we do this? How do we adjust this attitude? Well, let me just give you a few things that we draw from this passage. All right, number one, you've got to learn God's wisdom. Where do you learn that? You learn it from the Bible. And by the way, how do you learn it from the Bible? You read it in order to understand it. You understand it in order to apply it. All right? And you apply it in order to make it a habit in your life. And so you learn God's wisdom. That's why we gather together. That's why we have children's ministry and youth ministry. We really want you to know these things. By the way, how many of you know that if you lived this way, your life would be better? Would you agree with me? And how about that student at school? If they could just learn this, their life would be a lot better. Yeah, or sucker. But how about this? How do we fight the fight that matters? We recognize the nature and danger of worldly wisdom. So when selfishness starts to creep in, when envy starts to creep in, when selfish ambition starts to creep in, you and I must immediately go, oh, wait a second. That's the way the world thinks. That's animalistic. That's earthly. That'll lead to destruction. I need to change my attitude immediately. I need to have woo, woo, woo. All right? The bells and whistles have to go off, and you've got to go, that is wrong. There have been times where I've been in the middle of just a rant, and it just goes off in my brain. You're stupid. This is wrong. Don't do this. And I've stopped in the middle of the rant and said, I'm sorry. Because what I'm doing right now is totally ridiculous. And would you forgive me? You want to really put an end to a fight, do it like that. It tends to work. All right? Recognize the nature and danger of worldly wisdom. Fight the tendency to follow the world's way of thinking. This is the 20th anniversary of the first gay marriage in the United States. 20th anniversary was this week. 20 years ago in Massachusetts. 20 years ago in Massachusetts, 70% of Americans' heads went up, spun around, came back down because we just couldn't believe it. And so within 5 years, now this is absolutely true, within 5 years, it went from 70% opposed to gay marriage to 70% for gay marriage. That means 40% of the population had to change their mind in 5 years. That's worldly wisdom. And what has happened was the ball got rolling and people just fell in, including the church. Well, the church has to recognize that worldly wisdom will lead to destruction. Broken families, people miserable. We recognize it already. People who are in those lifestyles have a much, much higher rate of taking their own lives. And all kinds of other issues that go with it because it just doesn't work. Worldly wisdom doesn't work. I don't care what the Supreme Court says because we don't follow man's law, we follow God's law. And God's law is true, and especially in areas like this. So we want to make sure we follow God's way. Now, I think this is important. Trust in God's temporal and eternal rewards for being selfless. Do you really believe that if you're selfless, you let somebody else take the better sucker, that it's going to turn out better for you in the end? Do you really believe that if you say, honey, where do you want to eat today? Oh, you don't want to eat at the Mexican restaurant? Okay, we'll go where you want to go. How many of you know that'll turn out better for you in the end? All right? It might not work out better for you in the moment. Somebody else is going to be eating your nachos, but it does turn out better for you in the end. But it really, by the way, it really works great in covenant love where you're both doing that. And then you get plenty of Mexican food, all right? And so you got to also, though, that trust that God is going to give you an eternal reward. And so it's what you said earlier. Earthly says, I want it now. Godly wisdom says, I'm willing to wait for my reward for later because I know this is the best way. And by the way, the reward is not just eternal. It's not just eternal. It's temporal. You'll have all the fruits of this better relationship and of having and being thought of as wise. And then this is really important. Learn to look at yourself as part of the whole. Ephesians 5 says that we're many, but all parts of what? One body. And so the kidney doesn't need the same thing that the liver needs. Liver doesn't need the same thing that the heart needs. But they're all part of one body. And if one part of the body fails, the whole body fails. And so we need to learn to understand that we're part of the whole. And so I was joking earlier, but it's really true. We're one of how many? 7 billion people in this world? And if we think the world revolves around us and there's 700 billion other people who think the world revolves around them, what do you think's going to happen? We're going to nuke each other. You're going to be fighting over the fence in your yard with your neighbor. You're going to be fighting in your home. It's going to be constant struggle. But if you realize you're just one of 7 billion people and God sees you, he knows you, he's going to reward you for being selfless and kind, then God will take care of you in the end. Any thoughts or questions? I don't know if you all heard that. Jesus, others, and yourself is joy. That's so true. It's simple, but it's true, isn't it? You bless others to receive a blessing. Absolutely. We don't do it to receive, but we bless it knowing that it will come back. I am second. A good reminder. Going back, for the joy that was set before him, Jesus endured the cross. And what was the joy? You were. Was that cross short-sighted misery? There's no misery on this planet compared to what that was. But he endured it. Why? For the joy that was set before him. And so he put you first and me first. And you're not going to have a good witness if you're selfish. How many of you have ever observed that a grandmother's love is about as Christ-like a love as you can get on this earth? Which leads me to the last thing I want to show you. Model Christ. We said it earlier, Jesus, others, and yourself. What a great segue. Model Christ who humbled himself for the love of the Father and for us. And if you in your relationship, if you'll say, I'm going to be Christ-like in my relationship, well, you'll get it right. And then you'll have the joy that was set before him, he received. Every time somebody comes to faith in Christ, can't you imagine he just overflows with joy? What a beautiful thing. Whenever we follow worldly wisdom, it's a black hole that nothing will fill. When you listen, when you hear, look out for number one will never be filled. It will always be empty. Well, God bless you. It's been great to be with you this semester. I really, again, appreciate Jim helping me out so much late last semester and early this semester. And it's a delight. It's one of the highlights of my week together with you guys on Wednesday night. And again, a big thank you to Matthew, who's helped film us on these. And then he takes them, edits out all the stupid things that I say. It says it takes him about a week and a half to do that. They end up being a 5-minute video. And again, a massive, you all who have done our food on Wednesday night, we are deeply appreciative. Very, very thankful. It's a blessing. We will begin again around the second week of August, okay? And then we'll have opportunities to do some service with the kids. When you see Kenny and Tammy, love on them and let them know how much you appreciate them. God bless you. Thank you for being here tonight.